What's up, guys? We are on Wednesday, the 11th, and I'm going to look at the CodeHS from last time, plus a little bit looking ahead at the next one. And I'm going to start this as a routine to post a little video each day, since I do have several people absent for whatever reason. I don't want to make it so that they see nothing and they get behind. I want to make it so that they're getting at least some of the attention and explanation that they would get if they were in the room. So we did the Python pretest. If you were here, I reviewed that in the room. But if you weren't, that's okay. It was just a pretest. It's not about getting it right. It's just about introducing the ideas. The welcome, we skipped. The turtle graphics thing we skipped, but we might come back. And what I assigned last time was this one, Python console interaction. So we'll look at that today. And then the next assignment is going to be this guy. So we might look at one of those today just to get a little preview. So this one has just text. There's no graphic, but you're going to take some input from the user and then do a little bit to it. Maybe a little bit of math if it's a number, maybe a little bit of putting a couple words together if it's a string, and then you will serve up an answer to the user with the print function. This is kind of like making a function in terms of you get input, you do something to it, and you give an output, although we're not wrapping it up in the function name yet. That'll come soon. So which one of these should we look at? Okay, user input. We'll look at that one. And I'm going to go to the one that says exercise. Or why don't we do the last one just to get the most on there. So when you use input, you just type the word input and then you put something in a prompt after it. That's what the user is going to see. So usually it's going to end with like a colon or maybe a question mark. And then whenever they type, you're going to save it under a name, a label, and then you can use that for whatever. So what you want it to get as a goal is enter your age, and then they put whatever, and then you tell them the next number. You'll need this many for your next birthday. So like if they put 5, you're going to give them 6 or whatever. So this one's actually 3 steps, and that means getting the input is fine, doing math is fine. If you just say +1, there's no problem, and printing is fine, but the hard part is it's got to be the right type, and they don't really stress that in the instructions, but they've mentioned it along the way in other ones. You need to have your number is sort of like in math land where you can do math with it, but then when it's time to print it on the screen, it needs to be in its string clothing. The string is something that can appear in quotation marks as a printed thing, and instead of it's a value. Yeah. So let's look at that. So they want us to say enter your age, and we're going to take that. So let's say age equals input, enter your age, bada bing, bada boom. But here's the problem. If you do that, it might use it the right way. It might say, hey, they put in a number. We're going to assume how to use it. We're going to assume what you mean. But let's not rely on that. Let's just stress and tell the computer, hey, this is an integer. We're going to use it for integer stuff. We're going to do math with it. And we're going to do some, we're going to take it into math land where it has to get a number added. So it's not like if they put a 17, it's not the character 1 and the character 7. It's the value. It's like the concept of 17. So I'm going to go int wrapped around this guy. Now it might work without it, but let's not take our chances. Let's say, hey, this is a number and it's going to be used as a number. And then later we might put it in different clothing, but at first we're going to treat it the way it needs to be in the moment. So now I'm going to say new age is age plus 1. Okay. Their age now is different from what we want to display, what is going to be their next age. Okay, let's say next. I'm going to call it next instead of new. It just sounds slightly better. Although you can call it whatever you want. If you wanted to say X and Y, that's fine, unless you look back later and can't tell what you meant, or somebody else looks at it later and can't tell what you meant. So now we're going to say print you will need this. I don't know if you need to type exactly what they say, but why not? So we're going to print that plus, and see when I use the plus here, it's not the same plus as this one. This one was plus in math land, so it was taking the value and putting more value into it. You know, like if they put 5, we're going to say 5 plus 1 is not 51, it's 6. But this plus is in the string.
Marching band students, if you have not already headed to the band room, you need to do so at this time, please. Marching band students that are going on the trip this morning, you need to head to the band room. Thank you.
So if I do this, we're getting closer because it's going to say you'll need this many candles and then next age. But the problem is next age is still in math land. It's still showing the value as value instead of as characters. So I'm going to say string wrapped around that. And it might have worked without it. Sometimes they know what you mean and they give you a little head start and go easy on you, but we don't want to make the computer guess what we meant. We can just specify. So let's hit run and see what happens. Apparently nothing. Hey, it worked. Okay. Now this isn't perfect because if the user puts a word here, like that's gonna give an error. So later, once we get better, we'll add a little thing that says, hey, if they put something that we don't accept, we're gonna give them a try again message and loop back around. But we're keeping it simple right now. So if they do it right, the whole thing's gonna work. Question? Okay, let's look at that one. I got a question about the one before this, which is where? Right here, the hello? Okay, so let's look at the hello one. It's going to say, write a program that takes the user's name and then says hello and then the name. So this is hello and separate line, which is, I don't know why they want to do that, but hey. So it says user name is going to be the value or the place where we store this value. So username is input. What is your name? And input defaults to string. So like I could put str wrap around it and it would be great. But if you just do input and people type some stuff, it's going to treat it as a string as a default. So we're probably okay. And then we're going to say print hello, print, no, not quotes, user name. So let's hit run to see if that gets any errors or anything. Hey, that worked. Okay. If you are doing one of these and it's like a multi-part thing and you're not sure, I would recommend you click on this little guy that says test cases, because then it will go through and look for each one. So if you were like green, green, and then the third one was red, then it would say, hey, specifically look at this, and it would give you more targeted input of like, hey, here's the one you need. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because like
Okay.
I had got the first band into their name or something, and then like I don't know how to like store it to
So we have two functions so far. We've been using print and we've been using input, but they work in different ways, which is that print is almost always its own line. Like you just say print and then do the thing. But input is almost never its own line. You say something equals input, blah, blah, blah. So even though we've had two functions and we've used them quite a bit and they're pretty simple, they're kind of playing different roles. Print is like, hey, this is what the line is doing. We say right at the beginning print, and the rest is just describing what kind of print. Whereas input is more like, oh, we're making a variable. That's what the line is doing. And then input is a subset of those actions. And I have seen a few people try to do lines like this, where you just say input, what is your name? And that's really close. That's on the right track. And that is following the pattern that we saw with print. But we need to give it a space. Yeah.
So you didn't pick 12 and equal input because that's how I did it first. It didn't work, but like I don't think equals.
Yeah. When you make your variable names, they can be whatever you want. I said user underscore name because it said that in the directions. And they might check for that. If I hit submit, they might say, oh, it has to be exactly that name. You could do other names too. Now, there are conventions, meaning like a tradition that people follow. Like usually variable names are lowercase and they use underscores between words if it's a multi-word thing. But it doesn't have to be. It's just prettier. Okay. So I'm going to quickly look ahead to the next one because I don't want to make a long video. If I post a video that's 30 minutes, nobody's going to click on it. So let's go ahead and look at something in Unit 4 because that's what we're going to do next. And let's just pick a random one from the middle, old enough to vote. Okay, so it's going to say, how old are you? And then are you old enough to vote? Yes or no? And that's adding one new thing, which is Unit 4 is all about logic. If something is true, if something is false, then we go down those branches. But these are going to be really simple branches that are just one line. So I think you'll understand, especially because the word if is already an English word that we use all the time in the same way they do in the code. So this says, what's your age? And then if it's 18 or more, we say you're good. If it's not, we say you're not. So, I opened this yesterday in another class, and it's already got my stuff typed in. I thought I was going to type it again for you guys. So age equals input. And since we're going to do mathy stuff, like instead of plus or minus, we're doing less than or greater than, but it needs to be a value instead of just the character 1 and the character 8. I put int around it. It might have worked otherwise. It might have kind of known what we meant and given us a shortcut, but let's go ahead and be safe. And so if it's greater than or equal to 18, we say you're good. Else, which means any other situation, we say you're not. Okay? That's just an example because I know some people are going to go on to Chapter 4 or Unit 4 today, and I'm going to put in that assignment even though it's not due right away. So I'm going to end this video now, and it gets to be under 15, and I'll post it and start our playlist and get all our habits going because we might end up using these videos for the foreseeable future. Thanks.